everybody. Welcome to the third and final day of the 2020 International Conference on Atheism. My name is Dr. Darren Slade. I am the president of the Global Center for Religious Research, which has been bringing you this three-day virtual academic conference, which you have been joined by people from all 7 continents, from all over the world during this three-day conference. It's been exciting, so thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you for coming out and supporting us. Now, I have the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce a scholar who's actually coming to us at nighttime in London, England right now, Dr. Franco Manni. Now, Dr. Manni today is going to talk about atheists and Christian theologians as travel companions. Dr. Manni has a bachelor's in theology as well as a graduate degree in philosophy and a PhD in philosophical theology from King's College, London. He's worked on 4 dominant subjects, including Italian political philosophers, philosophical theology and theological ethics of authors like Thomas Aquinas, Victor White, and Herbert McCabe. He's also done studies on the work of J.R.R. Tolkien, in particular focusing on how Tolkien is referred to the 20th century political history and to the history of philosophy, and current topics related to our socio-political climate, things to deal with race and racism, the reform of the humanities syllabus, and social injustices stemming from corruption, systemic corruption. So with that said, it is a great privilege to be able to introduce my friend, Franco. You have the floor, sir.
Oh, thank you, Darren. Yes, I'm a little bit intimidated because you mentioned 7 continents, so I have to compete with the penguins of Antarctica. Well, so I start immediately with my paper, and yes, theologians and atheistic scientists, how they can support intellectually each other. In this paper, we'll talk about the current conflict between the new atheists and their critics, very shortly. Second, the attitude of sympathy towards the atheists that this renowned, not that renowned, but very intelligent scholar, Herbert McCabe, had. And 3, McCabe's critical dialogue in relation to the atheism of scientists. And the last part or section is the benefits of this dialogue for both theology and the natural sciences. So, the new atheists and the critics. In 2007, a journalist coined the term or the phrase new atheism, indicating in Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett, the leading thinkers of an intellectual movement of the early 21st century, whose concern is to demonstrate that all religions, including in particular Islam and Christianity, are instigators of irrationalism and fanaticism, and therefore should be relentlessly criticized and rebutted with a review to persuading people to abandon them. In this attitude of theirs, the new atheists are different from many atheistic intellectuals of the second half of the 20th century, who did not actively want to fight religions, such as Karl Popper, Stephen Jay Gould, John Rawls, Claude Lévi-Strauss, and Umberto Eco, to provide a few but high-level examples. For instance, the leading new atheist Dawkins today writes, quote, "What theology ever said that is of the smallest use to anybody? When has theology ever said anything that is demonstrably true and is not obvious? What makes you think that theology is a subject at all. Unquote. The new atheists in recent years have been opposed, however, by some Christian theologians who have considered it important to polemize and refute the new atheists' claims. The leader of, for instance, so-called orthodoxy, it is a stream or school of theology based in England, John Milbank, and also Terry Eagleton, perhaps the most important public intellectual in England currently. And Dennis Turner, who is a scholar of Middle Ages, of philosophy of Middle Ages, but also a militant theologian. Another one, an American one actually, David Bentley Hart, who says, quote, "What I find most mystifying in the argument of the authors I have mentioned, the new atheists, and of others like them, is the strange presupposition that a truly secular society would, of its nature, be more tolerant and less prone to violence than any society shaped by any form of faith. Given that the modern age of secular governance has been the most savagely and sublimely violent period in human history, by a factor or body count of incalculable magnitude, it is hard to identify the grounds of their confidence." End quote. It is interesting to note that all the four aforementioned scholars take their sophisticated theological ideas from just one person, one important, clever, fundamental thinker, Herbert McCabe, who inspired the four of them. First idea. God created the universe and therefore is not part of it, and therefore can't be an explanation for the phenomena of the universe. Therefore, every phenomenon in the universe can be explained fully only by other phenomena in the universe. Second idea, we can prove rationally the existence of God, but we can't know what God is. He is unknown and unknowable. Indeed, these scholars may have taken McCabe's ideas, but not his attitude. Let us have a look to that Herbert McCabe's attitude. A couple of words about his life. McCabe was an Englishman, born in 1926. He died in 2001. In his youth, he joined the Dominican order and became a priest and a friar. He was not an academic. His main intellectual activities were preaching at church and teaching at school. The vast majority of his writings are just short texts he used to prepare before preaching and teaching. As a scholar, he was enthusiastic admirer of Thomas Aquinas. At the time, not now, but at the time then, 40, 50 years ago, when almost everyone considered Aquinas an antiquated, useless relic from the past. And he also tried to relate his thought, the thoughts of Aquinas, to that one of Wittgenstein, actually Wittgenstein's philosophy of language. McCabe did debate with several theologians in various contexts between the 60s and the 80s, but never debated with any atheist. On the contrary, readers of his major book, God Matters, encounter atheism only to realize how much, according to McCabe, it is close to scientific research and to the committed, endless quest of a sincere believer. Quote, to prove the existence of God would be like proving the validity of science. I don't mean science is a body of established facts set out in textbooks, but science as an activity of research currently going on. The venture or adventure into the unknown. The asking of radical questions is discouraged by any society that believes in itself, believes it has found already the answers, that only its authorized questions are legitimate. Faced with such hostility, you can say, I wait and see. But that way, then you will find that in spite of everything, science will make startling and quite unexpected changes. And this, I think, is parallel to asserting a belief in God. What we often call atheism is not a denial of the God of which I speak. Very frequently, the man who sees himself as an atheist is not denying the existence of some answer to the mystery of how come that there is anything instead of nothing. He is denying what he thinks or has been told is a religious answer to this question. He thinks that Christians claim to have discovered what the answer is, that there is some grand architect of the universe who designed it. Now, if denying this claim makes you an atheist, then I and Thomas Aquinas are atheistic too. Unquote. So, McCabe thinks that the theologian can be a travel companion of any serious atheist. And now, McCabe's dialogue with atheistic scientists. One kind of atheism McCabe dealt with has a positivistic flavor and focuses on the origin of the universe and refuses God for the sake of science. We can consider Pierre Simon de Laplace and Ernst Haeckel as typical representatives of this current in the 19th century. This atheism originates from a rebuttal of the so-called argument from design. Allegedly a Christian argument, popularized by William Paley in his Natural Theology, and famously criticized by Richard Dawkins, the leading new atheist, in his successful, very, very, very successful, The God Delusion. And this is the argument. No worries. It is very short. Pay attention, however. It is made of two premises. Very short, but pay attention. This is the argument. One of the greatest challenges to human intellect has been to explain how the complexities of some natural features have arisen because of their improbability. Second, the appearance of design should be related to a designer, God. In the case of a man-made artifact, such as a watch, the designer really was an intelligent human engineer. it is natural to apply the same logic to an eye, or a wing, a spider, or a person, and think of a superhuman engineer, that is, God. The argument is over. The argument about the existence, to prove the existence of God, from design. Very short, isn't it? Although McCabe recognizes that this argument from design is a commonplace among Christians, he nevertheless reminds us that there is also a classical Christian theological tradition deeply rooted in the Philosophia Perennis, so the highest quality or stream of philosophy starting from Aristotle. And so, yes, we could call this stream, long-lasting stream, 23 centuries, apophatic theology, a tradition which provides rational arguments that support a biblical paramount message. Although we human beings can be grateful for the amazing features of the world, we must not think to be able to understand God's thoughts, plans, or design. His paths are not our paths. McCabe acknowledges as a good contribution the statements by the scientists that such a design does not exist in the reality studied by sciences. And also, a good contribution from atheist scientists is to say that if God were such a designer, then God would not exist, in accordance with what the atheistic scientists say. However, McCabe believes that a creator God does exist, even though he is not the designer of that argument. Creation is a unique, peculiar cause. Differently from all the other causes, creation does not make any changes to the world. Between creator and creatures, there is a tension between God, who is existence, and creatures who have existence. Whereas between creatures and their natural causes, which are themselves creatures, there is just the strain, tension, between potentiality and actuality. In fact, Aquinas says that in contrast to making, creating does not imply any real change from potentiality into actuality. In fact, the nothing, creation is creation from nothing, the nothing is not potential to something. The nothing is not potential to something. Very philosophical, isn't it? Nevertheless, our mind thinks it as if it was a change. If it was a change. Because our mind is inadequate, is animal-based. So, in a body with senses of the body. And so we can't understand what this particular kind of making, that is creation, means. For example, can illustrate the concepts. One kind of making we understand is to generate, begetting, fathering, mothering, generating. For instance, when Fido the dog is born, it does not change. In fact, prior to its birth, there is not any Fido dog apt to change. However, both the active and passive features in its parents, those little things, little eggs, spermatozoa, do change. And moreover, the world changes, since previously the world really had the potential to include Fido, and now it actually includes it. One difference between creation and causality among creatures is therefore that the latter works within a world, where every effect is potential. Potentiality is there because other things already exist. Instead, creation is ex nihilo, from nothing, that is not out of anything that already exists and so can change. Moreover, ex nihilo, not out of anything, is actually the world, the universe, which is created together with what it contains, that is, everything. Quote, God made everything, or God makes everything. Sounds harmless enough at first. But let us look at some of the implications. In the first place, if God made everything, God can't be included in everything. God can't be one of the beings that go to make up everything. So, everything plus God is not any greater than everything just by itself. End quote. According to this doctrine, God is not alongside God, the world, alongside the world. However, we humans, because we are animals, rational animals, however, animals. We are not able to hold the proper concept of creation, and we are not obliged to build an imaginary pattern representing the creator God and the created universe alongside each other. We are obliged to depict in our imagination God and the universe as two beings alongside each other. We cannot help doing that because we are animals, provided with senses and the echoes of the senses, which are images stored in our brain, animal brain. More in particular, since God's act of creation does not make changes, it does not leave traces. Therefore, the improbable complexity highlighted by this argument from design by Paley is not at all a detection of God's action, instead of natural causes. So, McCabe criticized the theism of this argument from design, which suggests that it's possible to find traces of God within creation. For instance, order, complexity, ingenuity, etc. And so, according to McCabe, both the theist and the atheist scientists believe that God, if he exists, is the most powerful entity in the universe, and therefore within the universe, the atheist, quote from McCabe, the atheist and the theist will expect both of them to see exactly the same features, end quote. For example, ingenuity, peculiar changes, and purpose, mainly, most of all, purpose. The difference is that the atheist, while investigating the universe, is not able to find such a powerful entity in the universe. And thus, he denies the existence of God and of his creative activity, whereas the theist claims to be able to find them. But that is not according to McCabe. What is created, that is, what exists because the whole universe already exists, does not have any created characteristics that could enable us to detect any activity by the creator. There is no quality like to be a creature as a quality, to be red, to be big, to be sweet, to be created. No. The fact that things are created does not leave any trace in them. To be created means to exist from nothing. An existing thing, pay attention, and an existing thing does not have different qualities in comparison with the non-existing things. Whereas, apart from creation, all the other causes do make differences in the world, but God doesn't. He makes things precisely as they are, the world as it is. You can say that a hurricane has been there. Hurricane. A violent storm. But you cannot say that God has been there, since there are no detectable traces of God. Therefore, the argument from design is wrong. Because you cannot say, look at what the world is like, orderly, complicated, ingenious, so it must have been made by God. You cannot say that this particular kind of world that exists has or had to be made by God. You cannot say that this kind or sort, species, or particular kind of world must exist instead of others. You can't. After these recollections of McCabe's ideas and taking the cue from the last sentence with its Darwinian anti-teleological flavor, I observe that McCabe, as a theologian, has arrived at these conceptions not above all because he had read Aquinas. In fact, most of the other theologians have read Aquinas as well.